everybody. It's Bunny Pounds with another conversation with Christians Engaged. I am so pumped about today. We've got State Comptroller Glenn Hegar, who is a man of faith, just an amazing leader for our state of Texas, and he is our State Comptroller. This is a statewide elected office that most people don't understand, and we're going to dig deep today on what does he actually do for a living. And what is it like running the ninth largest economy in Texas? So just to remind you all, we are all about helping people pray, vote, and engage. It's time to pray for our elected officials and government leaders, our state and nation regularly. It's time to vote in every election, and it's time to engage in some sort of political education and activism. So today is all about education. So let me get right into this and introduce our state comptroller. So Glenn Hegar is the Texas Chief Financial Officer. So think of CFO for the state of Texas. Again, the ninth largest economy in the world, people. The state's treasurer, he is the chief check writer, tax collector. I'm going to maybe ask him a little bit about Matthew in the Bible. Procurement officer and revenue estimator, a job that is particularly important these days as the state has undergone some incredible impacts from the pandemic and weaknesses in the oil and gas industries. So, Glenn Hegar has gained a reputation for customer service, transparency in government, which we all love. Conservative fiscal management. He is a 1993 graduate of Texas A&M. All those Aggies out there are doing their little whoop or whatever they do. Graduate of St. Mary's University, where he earned a Master's of Arts and his law degree, and a University of Arkansas graduate where he earned his Master's of Law. I don't know what the difference is between his law degree and his Master's of Law, but we might have to ask him that. Sixth generation Texan, he grew up farming land that's been in his family since the mid 1800s. He's joined today from his house in Katy, where he shares it with his wife, Dara, and his three children, Claire, Julia, and Jonah. Love those names. Comptroller, thanks for joining us today.
It's great to be with you again. Love to see you this morning. Awesome.
Woohoo! So when we were experiencing the beginning of COVID-19 in the state of Texas, people were really afraid, and we started doing some prayer calls statewide, which over 5,000 people participated with us on our prayer calls last year. And thank you for being a part of one of those. It was great to have you.
It was good to be with you, Dan. I appreciate that. And thank you for whatever prayers. That's important every day in our lives, but it's really important over the last 11 months.
Yes. Well, let's just dive deep into what is it like to run the ninth largest economy in the world. People don't think about the state of Texas and how large we are and just really everything that happens. So here you are, the chief, financial officer of Texas, the state treasurer. Tell us a little bit about your day-to-day job. What does that look like?
Yeah, well, it's interesting in the fact that as I get out and talk, whether obviously in the last 11 months, it's more this mechanism via virtual versus being in person. But I love talking about the state economy, what's going on in Texas, how men and women every single day are creating businesses, creating jobs. People want to move to the state of Texas for an economic opportunity. Today, just like my family did in the 1840s, that trend has continued. And so, when you look at where you're at today, there in the Metroplex, it's hard to imagine the Metroplex alone would be the 14th largest economy in our nation from a take-home perspective, or where I'm sitting at on the outskirts of Houston, we'd also be the 14th largest in the nation as a state economy from a take-home pay. And so when you piece all 12 economic regions together, it's amazing to see that we're the ninth largest economy. For me, we have a large operation. I have three main constitutional duties that I talk a lot about, which you mentioned as we were getting started. One, running the state treasury. So the state treasury on a given year right now, that state budget, whether it's a third federal dollars and two-third state dollars, roughly is over $125 billion a year.
That is a lot of money, friend.
Billions of dollars. And so we make sure 14 million payments are issued. Most of those are electronic, and I'm glad of that. And the reason is because I had to sit at my desk and sign every one of those 14 million payments. I'd have to sign over 100 payments every 60 seconds, 40 hours a week, 52 weeks out of the year. I couldn't even take off on Good Friday because I'd have to sit there. So and I make that point only to put in the size and scope of how big the treasury is. And then, as you mentioned, I'm the tax collector for the state of Texas, making sure that there's fairness in the system. We treat all taxpayers, all the issues that come up with new types of businesses and or technologies. And so, thankfully, I've got a great staff, and my job is to put a lot smarter people in the room than me, make sure that we all know our task, we all know our mission, and we move forward, because the most important thing is customer service. Because the fact is, we work for the Texas taxpayers, and making sure that we have a system that's fair. None of us want to pay taxes. We all understand that, but as long as it's fair, it's transparent, it's open. So I've been doing this job 6 years, and let's just say I'm not sure if I've actually had a repeat of the exact same day yet. You never know what's coming, and especially over the last 11 months, wow, it was challenging with so many new issues we never thought we would have to tackle on or deal with, and working with businesses. And so, but it's never a dull moment in any shape, form, or fashion for me or my staff in the controller's office.
Well, that sounds like a fascinating job. I mean, when you have a job that everything changes day to day, that's fun for me, at least. You've been great, Glenn, on transparency, on helping government work better. You did a whole bunch of reforms when you came in there as the state comptroller in 2014. Talk to us a little bit about the Transparency Star program. What that looks like, and why is it important that you recognize local governments and keeping them fiscally responsible as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at the state of Texas, the fact is we're a big economy, we're a growing economy. I just got off an interview with someone talking about what's going on here in the state of Texas. You have 1,000 more people in Texas every single day, and so that growth that occurs means we need to make sure we have roads, water infrastructure, our schools. And so I think it's been really important. When I came in, Susan Combs, the prior controller, had a similar type program, but we had not refreshed it in a few years. And so I wanted to refresh it, and I wanted to make sure that we were focusing on local governments more than just their traditional finances. What are their debt levels? What is happening in their contracting areas? And so to me, this program is more of a carrot than a stick. I don't have an ability to mandate them, but I can actually put some competition out there, that if your local community goes and wants to get a star from the controller's office, which is about transparency, making sure that they have information out there and not putting out their comprehensive financial information, which may be really, really thick and hard to understand. That's important to have out there for the really, really nerdy people that want to look at it, but you need to have something that's quick and easy, like an infographic that we can see the highlights and the high points. And so we have 5 different stars. Again, whether it's traditional finances, whether it's debt, it's their contracts, their procurement process. And so we have several different layers. And by going out and making sure one community, they want to be able to say, we have this star from the controller's office. We're making sure that our taxpayers understand and have the ability to get that information. Well, that means the next community over, their taxpayers are going, well, wait, so-and-so city has it. Why don't you have it? And so the whole point is, it's been driven that competition, and we see continuing with the number of communities, but not everybody's going to get it. Not everybody's going to have that. And, that's really what you want to highlight, those shining stars out there that are providing that greater information and transparency, and being true to the taxpayer, and making sure, as they're accountable for your dollars that you pay every year.
That is such an important thing. We talk about this kind of taxpayer like it's this little alien out there that, we have no connection with. And we forget that we are the taxpayers and that this is our money, right? In state government, local government. And so, you're a solid social conservative, Glenn. You led the charge for the life movement when you were in the Texas House and the Texas Senate. Many people might not remember that, Wendy Davis led a filibuster against your bill to protect the unborn, right? So you have a history of caring about those issues. And Christians historically, especially evangelical Christians, have cared deeply about the unborn. And that is one of the issues that we vote on. But why in the world should we care about the fiscal issues? I like to make the case that, we're dealing with money that God cares about, the stewardship of our families and our communities. So talk to us for just a minute about why we should even care about what you do. Or why should we care about holding our elected officials as we encourage them, but we also hold them accountable on these issues?
I think first and foremost on the latter one, it's extremely important because I think, so many people, they don't engage in the political process because they get frustrated. One, who are these people? Do they represent us? I think most people, I really do believe when they enter into politics, they want to do it for the right reasons. But as I've explained to my almost 16-year-old, so pray for me just because of the fact that I've got almost a driver in 4 weeks today.
I
And
remember those days.
yes, and then I've got twins that are 13 in just about 6 weeks, and so we got lots of teens almost here in the household. But as I was explaining to them not too long ago on some issues that were going on politically in the state and the country, and I said, power is really corrosive. It's corrosive to people. We're human beings. We have old sin nature, and that power corrodes. Now, whether they become corrupt is another issue. Most don't, but some do, and I think the fact is that we all get real jaded because we see this. And I think it's important that, you're engaged in the political process, because if you're not, there's someone else sitting at that seat at the table. And the question is do they represent your values and what you believe in and what you really want the community that you call home in the state and the country going to be in the next 5, 10, 15, and 20 years for the future generations. And so I think, holding people accountable to what they said that they mean and what they represent as they get into that corrosive nature of politics and government that can potentially be there is extremely important. And then from a financial standpoint, I joke with people all the time that we have three things in common. We are born, we die, and what do we do in between? We pay taxes. We're going to pay taxes. And so
Right.
the fact is, do you want your money spent on something that is actually going to make a difference and be limited in the area that you and I can spend our dollars better than what government can? But the fact is, we're going to make sure that kids are educated. We want to make sure that we have roads, we have infrastructure, and we have certain things that you and I come together can do a better job than you and I individually trying to build a road in front of our house. But with that being said, we want to make sure that those dollars are spent in accordance. And so, the social issues are extremely important. They're important to you and I, but also fiscally, no matter what, every government is going to have part of your money and they're going to be spending it. So that is the one thing that is common through every level of government that is out there. They may not deal with pro-life issues, but they're going to deal with your money. And you want to make sure that the money is spent in the right ways and it's spent in the ways that they say it's going to be spent on.
Well, I'm probably going to get some people mad at me for taking Bible out of context, but Jesus even said, where your treasure is, your heart is, right? And so there should be a little bit of our heart that follows where our money goes. It's, when you tithe your church, when you give to a nonprofit, when you give to charitable causes, your heart follows that, right? Maybe think about tax dollars a little differently, folks. Maybe think about, maybe you have some responsibility in a democratic republic to care about where your money's going and how efficiently that's being spent and what it's being spent on. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. Thanks you for letting me have that for a second, Comptroller. So let's dig deep a little bit on that, and then we'll go back to Texas. I want to talk about, you're an elected official, you're statewide, you represent millions of Texans. I know you're a man of faith. I know the Lord and your Christian faith is extremely important to you. But how do you keep grounded? I mean, what does that look like day to day? I mean, I'm sure your schedule is just off the charts busy constantly.
Yeah, the fact is at least for me, I'm fortunate that I grew up with a family. My grandfather on my mom's side was a Baptist preacher. My grandmother on the Hegar side was very faithful and being rooted and seeing that kind of those examples, is I think important as a foundation, at least for my wife and I, trying to create that foundation still currently for our kids. I mentioned to people that, as my almost 16-year-old, she's more independent than she was just 2 or 3 years ago or 6 or 10 years ago. And I think, for us, trying to give them a foundation, and a foundation that we're all going to have mountains that we have to climb. We're going to have valleys that we walk through, that we have to go through. Sometimes we walk through them. Sometimes we're going to have be carried through it because we can't make it. And, I think really at the beginning and the end of the day, there's some core foundations, which is your faith, your family. I try to tell my kids, we have friends, we count on others, but at the beginning and the end of the day, your core family unit, that's who you have. And so, I guess trying to reiterate that into my kids and, talk about that. I don't see as though wearing my sleeve, my faith kind of on, my shoulder or my sleeve. I think you try to do it by example, but in doing that, you also know I have weaknesses too. We all do, and we have to admit that. And I think those that look at Christians go, well, you have these high lofty goals, but or values, but you also have issues too. Well, we all do. And I think
Right.
the fact is that's what keeps us humble, is knowing that we're just another average individual. And I'm fortunate that, and also on the opposite, I have 3,000 people that are responsible in the agency, and I look at it as though I tell all my staff, all the things you do, you get the credit for all the good that's happening here because you're making it happen. But all the bad that happens, guess where it goes? My name is at the top, and it goes on me. And part of that is I want to make sure others get the joy and the good that we're doing, but also knowing that the burdens of the little things, they're on me. And I think the combination of those is what keeps me humble. And then if you knew my wife, she does a really good job at it too.
I'm sure she does. But yeah, that's incredibly good point about servant leadership. What does that look like day to day? And, we're not perfect. No one's perfect, but by the grace of God, He enables us and allows us to fulfill the purposes that He has for our life. And it's so exciting, for believers, Glenn, when we see people of faith that are walking in places of influence, such as you are. You might not be perfect on everything. We're not endorsing you as a candidate, as a nonpartisan ministry, but the reality is having people that love God. We know you're going to search for truth and you're going to search for wisdom in the right place, and that's so important for people. So, okay, let's go into a little bit more about Texas, because we both love Texas. I came here from Indiana. My dad was a pastor, and we made our way gradually down the central United States till we landed in the promised land when I was in middle school. So I'm so thankful. I've heard you speak several times on the uniqueness of Texas and the Texas economy. Can you just give us a few points about that talk and how unique we are to live in Texas?
One of the points that I make, which is just astonishing in every speech, is think about for the next week when you wake up every morning, there's roughly about 1,000 more people that call Texas home than they did the day before you went to bed. Now, literally, they didn't move here overnight while you were asleep. But the point is every day there's roughly another 1,000, 1,200 people. Now, half of that is natural growth, but another half of that are people that are literally moving from the other 49 states and from places all across the world. And I make that point over and over because what that shows you is ever since the beginning, when my family moved here originally in 1846 and 1848 was when my line got here. The two brothers decided to move to Texas of all places and start new roots down for an economic opportunity is what that was about. And that's what it's about today. And so I think, as long as Texas continues to remember that it's not state government that makes the state of Texas a great economic opportunity. It's you and I, individuals and people that want to create businesses, that want to have an opportunity, that want to create jobs for other people. And so, it's that mindset. And we continue to have that mindset. And I think as long as we try to focus on making sure people have an economic opportunity, a lower regulation system, a lower tax system, as well as economic liberties and freedoms are really core and essential in that. And so Texas still has that today. Obviously, our economy is very different than it was in the 1840s. It's very different than it was in the 1940s. It's very different than it was in the year 2000. But even though our economy is much more diverse and much more driven from professional sectors and other types of areas, still giving people that opportunity and making sure that we have a lower cost of living is extremely important, in my opinion.
Well, and yeah, I mean, we are really unique in that we have just a whole bunch of resources in the state that continue to drive the economy and help us in that. So we are going through some challenges with 2020. 2020 is continuing, right, into 2021. It never stops. So talk to us a little bit. We have a crisis in the oil and gas industry right now. We're going to have our railroad commissioner, one of our railroad commissioners, Christy Craddock, on this podcast in a week or so as well. And we're going to explain about all that. But how does oil and gas help us in Texas? How does that provide a great umbrella for our economy? And what in the world are we going to do with this budget shortfall?
Yeah, so oil and gas is an important part of the economy. I usually make the point that back in the 1980s, before the last real significant downturn in this economy, we've had some, the Great Financial Crisis in 2007 and some others, but back in the 1980s, oil was the Texas economy. Now, if you look at 2015 and 16, when there was a downturn in the oil industry and manufacturing, we're a very big manufacturing state, have been and continue to be. Maybe not the same number of jobs as it was, say, for example, 20 years ago, the job count has gone down, but that's not the right metric to look at. The one is GDP output. So GDP output has significantly improved. And why? Because robotics, electronics, all the types of systems, it may not use the same number of people, but the pay scale is higher. Same as in the oil and gas sector. We may not have the same number of people in the oil and gas area as we used to, but it is the highest paying job count of industry sectors in the state. And my point in back in 2015 and 16, when those industries had a downturn in the Metroplex where you call home, people looked around, what are you talking about, a downturn in these two industries? The Austin area, San Antonio to a lesser extent. Now, Houston, being the energy capital of the world, had more of an impact. So, there's diversity in the state. Now, that oil and gas, I kind of use it as the example. We all like to have cake. Now, we may like different types of cake, but oil and gas may not be the flour in the cake. It may not be the sugar and the ingredients, but it is the icing. And I don't know about you. So the Texas economy can operate without it, but the icing is what makes it taste really good. And so we're fortunate to have a strong oil and gas industry, which is having a harder time right now because of low prices and supply demand issues with COVID. But they've been through these challenges before. And so therefore, we're going to continue to have a strong oil and gas industry. Over the last several years, the Permian Basin was the most prolific field of growth, not just in the United States, but in the entire world. And so therefore, it is here, and blessedly, we don't use the revenues off of oil and gas severance taxes to fund basic elements of government. We put part of it in our state savings account for the good years to save it for when there is a so-called rainy day.
Rainy day fund, yes.
Right. And it's good to have it set that way. And the reason is because I usually have a slide, a handout that I provide to the legislature to make the point that oil and gas severance taxes is the most volatile revenue stream into the Treasury. So it may have gone up on average revenues about 7% over the last 20 years from year to year to year. But when you look up and down the chart, you can't find a single digit increase or decrease. And I make that point because they're all double-digit increases or decreases from year to year. So it's volatile, but the way we use those revenues is definitely a smart way because we're not dependent on it. Because, there's a saying in the oil field, Lord, if you just give me one more boom, I won't waste this one. Because there's always going to be booms and busts in that industry. It's extremely, the price is market-based around the world. But, the fact is, it has been an important part, and it continues to play an important role in our state economy.
Well, and of course, we're all moving and we want to move towards more renewable energy, et cetera. But that day is not here, And the beauty of what's happening in Texas is that we're providing a framework for America to stay energy independent so that we are not dependent on foreign oil and having to deal with all of that. So that's the national security side of what we do here in Texas. So, okay, let's get into it just a few more minutes. I know we only have a few more minutes. So let's dive into a little bit of this Texas budget process. So your job is you provide them estimates of revenue, kind of walk through that, and then the Texas Senate starts the budget. Kind of walk us, since you've been in all of those frames of jobs, talk to us a little bit about your connection and what you do with the legislators now in Austin.
Yeah, so as those three constitutional duties we were talking about earlier, one of them was the tax collection, two was running the treasury, and then the third one, which now we're talking about, is being the state's chief revenue estimator. And so what that really means is the day before session, which the legislature's there in an odd given year, so they're there now. So the second Monday in January, which the second Tuesday is when they come into session for the Constitution, I'm required to tell them how much we estimate will come in the state treasury starting in September of that year, which is September 1 of this year, 2021, and then running for where? The next 2 years. So an extremely long outlook. So being that I've been a former House member and a senator and understand working on the budget, I know that from a timeline, if we're going to give them any adjustments and estimates, that needs to come in the last of April, the beginning of May. But it's also important, even though they're out of session, during the time between sessions, if we see something substantially changed in the economy, I need to continue to talk about it. I need to be in the public. I need to be talking about managing expectations, good economy, bad economy, a change in trajectory. And so constantly messaging is extremely important, even though they may not be there and can change the budget. It allows leadership and everyone to know where are we going, which is the direction that the ship is headed. And so me and my team look at a wide range of different issues, complexities. Right now, there's more uncertainty than ever before. So the legislature, I give them this estimate. I talk to them a lot. I talk to them a lot between legislative sessions, again, so we can start setting up expectations. And then their job is, the one and only thing they have to do in a legislative session is they have to pass a 2-year budget. So they have started that process in the Senate. The House is going to start that process next week, just because they get committees a little bit later. It's a little bit harder to set committees for 150 members than it is for 31 members. So usually they get them a few weeks later. They'll start that process. Both chambers will work on their budgets, and then one will pass it to the other chamber, and then they'll send it back, and then the two will work out the differences. And then the first place it goes after they pass it is to my office. Why? Because I have to have a pen to sign it, and only if it certifies. In other words, we have to have a balanced budget in Texas. So we have to live within our means, and it has to make sure that it's within the available revenue that I told them. And then after that, it goes to the governor's desk for the last signature, and then the budget is in place for starting September 1 of this year.
Long live Texas. I mean, what an amazing state that we have to have a balanced budget. I know so many people in the federal government, specifically the Texas delegation in Congress, would love to have what we have in Texas, a actual budgetary process, and also the Sunset Commission, which is so great in Texas. If you all don't know about the Sunset Commission, we are actually teaching about that on our Austin 101 class that you can check out on our website. But we have to actually look at bureaucracies and parts of government and decide, is this valid anymore? Should this agency continue? Should this program continue? And you served as the youngest, by the way, youngest vice chair of that committee, and then became the chairman as well. Was that an experience?
No, it was a great experience. The fact is, most people don't realize, you look at agencies every 12 years, sometimes a little bit shorter. But the fact is, we review all state agencies to make sure that they're still doing the mission that they set out to be, or does that mission need to change? And while I was there as a vice chair and chair, we actually eliminated some agencies. Imagine that. We also, when I got into this role, there's some functions that really didn't fit in the core mission of the state controller's office. So we either eliminated them or we moved them to an agency where they fit better. And so that time as Sunset, to be able to look at ways to make government more efficient, more effective for us, the taxpayers, eliminating a few and then also saving money along the way. So I think it's extremely important to have another look at an agency from a different angle than what you do in a normal budgetary process, which happens every 2 years. So it's important we do it in a different fashion to make sure that they're operating in the manner that we want them to. And sometimes, technologies, our world changes, and we need to redirect the agency in a different direction.
Well, it's an incredible thing that we have in Texas, and I know some of my friends in Congress have bills to have a federal Sunset Commission, and we hope that they're successful on that. So, okay, just a little bit of fun before I let you go. Do people bring up Matthew in the Bible a lot to you?
They do that every so often. Absolutely.
Does your pastor ever called you out from the pulpit and said, we have Matthew here?
Usually, luckily, I don't get called out in church. I try to keep a real low profile. When you're the tax collector, you want to keep a low profile.
So the point is, you need Jesus just like Matthew needed Jesus, right? So, Comptroller, how can people learn more about your office? How can they contact your office and just kind of see an overview again of what y'all do and how they need to participate with that process?
You can look us up at Comptroller. I say Comptroller, but it's COMPTROLLER.gov. www.comptroller.texas.gov. So you can find us on our website, all types of information. If you do a name search for me, obviously the website's going to be about the first thing that pops up. And, if you have any type of questions, issues, you can always reach out to us. We'll make sure, you have our contact information. So anyone that reaches out to you, making sure that you call my staff, and we're always happy to help. And it's great to be with you today.
Yeah. And we always educate people. All of our elected officials, guys, have official websites for their agency, for their federal office or their state office. And then they have campaign websites. So, there's both. So just know that those are separate things. Okay. Now, funny question. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars. That's definitely Star Wars in the Hegar household by far.
Okay. Favorite Star Wars movie?
Oh my goodness, there's so many of them. I tell you, there was a run where my kids, we watched all of them over and over again. So it's kind of hard. Actually, I like the cartoon version where that they have the series on TV that you actually get to watch. My kids love it. They're not into it as much right now, being a little bit older, but actually that was pretty awesome because it was much broader than actually the movies were and filled in a lot of gaps.
Yes, I'm particularly loving Baby Yoda on the Disney Channel right now. So he's so cute. Okay, well, awesome. Thank you, Comptroller. So just a couple announcements real fast before we let you guys go. Our next Austin 101 class is March 16. You can register on our website at the event page. And if you register, go ahead and email us. We'll send you the last hour and a half. Actually, it was 2 hours by the time we got done with Q&A. Of the last class we did a few weeks ago. So that is not public. We're producing this class and we're using you all as guinea pigs to get this curriculum done, and then we will have that available. With that point, we do have our On-Ramp to Political Activism class available for the entire state of Texas. It just went live a few weeks ago. It is only $59 for 4 hours of training plus a live component where you can ask us any question and we'll get you activated. If you put in the code word on-ramp, you get $10 off. So that's cool. We cover everything from how to operate in political parties as believers, how to advocate for your legislation in Austin and Washington, D.C., how to get to know your elected officials, issues from a biblical perspective. We go through like 12 different issues and just kind of highlight what the Bible says and why the Bible should influence our thoughts on what's happening in culture. And then we spend an entire hour about how to operate as a Christian with integrity in the political movements. I mean, that is crazy. Like, how do you interact with these guys on social media? How do you get over suffering and persecution? How do you deal with fear, anger? All of it's there. So you want to be on that. So we will talk to you soon. Thank you, Comptroller, so much for joining us. And we will see you all next time.